The Tonight Show had never seen a guest like this. Dr. Rachel Martinez sat in the blue chair, her hands trembling as she held two children's drawings. Jimmy Fallon had no idea that what she was about to show him would stop the world from laughing. It was supposed to be a routine interview about healthcare heroes. Rachel had been invited after a viral video showed her sleeping in a hospital parking lot, too exhausted to drive home after another endless shift. The media called her a hero, but she felt like anything but one. The parking lot video had been filmed by a security guard who found her at 3 a.m., slumped over her steering wheel in scrubs that hadn't been changed in days. She'd been working at Mount Sinai during the worst surge, when ventilators ran out and decisions became impossible. Every choice meant life or death, and the weight of those choices had broken something inside her. The show opened with Jimmy's usual energy and the Roots setting the perfect mood. The audience was ready for inspiration, ready to applaud a frontline worker. But nobody was prepared for what Rachel had brought with her. "So, Dr. Martinez," Jimmy began with his warm smile, "you worked 72 hours straight during the pandemic surge. How did you find the strength to keep going?" Rachel's response wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of the uplifting story producers had briefed, her voice cracked immediately. "Jimmy, I need to show you something that's been destroying me for months." The studio atmosphere shifted instantly. Jimmy's smile faded as he recognized genuine pain. Rachel reached into her purse and pulled out two folded pieces of paper. "These are drawings my 5-year-old daughter made," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "One before the pandemic, one after I came back from the war zone we called the ICU." She unfolded the first drawing, holding it toward Jimmy with hands that still bore the marks of countless glove changes and hand sanitizer burns. The camera zoomed in on a colorful crayon drawing, a smiling woman in a white coat with bright eyes and rosy cheeks. The word "mommy" was written in shaky letters at the bottom. "This is how Emma saw me before," Rachel explained. Happy, present, the mom who read bedtime stories and made silly faces. Jimmy studied the drawing, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Then Rachel unfolded the second drawing. The contrast was devastating. The same white coat, but the face was gray and hollow, with dark circles that seemed to swallow the light. The eyes were drawn as empty black holes, the smile replaced by a straight line. The hair looked thin and stringy, falling around a face that Emma had colored with brown and gray crayons. At the bottom, in the same shaky handwriting, it said, "Mommy now." "She drew this last month," Rachel whispered. "6 months after I came home. This is still how she sees me. Not the mother who used to dance in the kitchen, but this, chef." Jimmy stared at both drawings, unable to speak. The studio fell completely silent as the weight of what they were seeing settled over everyone. This wasn't just about healthcare heroism anymore. "When I came home after those 72 hours, Rachel continued, tears flowing freely now, "Emma didn't recognize me. She actually hid behind her grandmother, because I looked like a stranger, like someone who had crawled out of the hospital's darkest corners." She paused, struggling to find words for the memory that haunted her daily. "I had lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks from not eating, surviving on coffee and adrenaline," she continued. "My hands shook constantly from exhaustion and too much caffeine. When I tried to hug her, she asked my mother, 'Where's my real mommy?' And I couldn't answer because I didn't know." The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front rows were wiping their eyes. Jimmy set the drawings down carefully on his desk like sacred objects. "I had lost so much weight, my hair was falling out from stress." Rachel went on. "My eyes were hollow, my skin was gray. I looked like the patients I'd been trying to save." Jimmy leaned forward, his full attention on Rachel. "How long did it take for her to recognize you?" he asked gently. 3 days, Rachel whispered. 3 days of my own daughter being afraid of me, flinching when I tried to touch her face, asking when her real mommy was coming home. That's when I realized I'd been so focused on saving everyone else's lives that I'd lost my own." The camera caught Jimmy's jaw tightening as he processed what she'd said. His eyes were beginning to glisten as the full impact hit him. This woman had literally poured herself out completely for strangers while her own daughter watched her disappear. The comedian in him wanted to find something light to say, but the father in him understood this was sacred ground. The worst part, Rachel continued, her voice breaking completely now, is that she drew the second picture a month ago, long after I thought I'd recovered. Even now, months later, that hollow-eyed stranger is still how she sees me. I don't know how to get my daughter back. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, something he rarely did during interviews. He walked around to the guest area and sat in the chair next to Rachel. The intimate gesture spoke louder than words. "Rachel," he said softly, using her first name instead of her title. "You said you feel like you lost your life. But looking at these drawings, I see something different." He picked up the second drawing again, studying it more carefully. "I see a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. I see someone who literally gave everything she had to keep people breathing." Rachel looked at him through her tears, surprised by his perspective. "But look what it cost me," she said, gesturing to the hollow-eyed figure in the drawing. "You're right," Jimmy acknowledged. "It cost you everything. But you know what I think your daughter was really drawing here?" He held up the second picture, pointing to the hollow eyes. "I think she was drawing what love looks like when it's been poured out completely. What sacrifice looks like when it's absolute." The studio was completely silent except for the soft sounds of people crying. Rachel stared at Jimmy, processing his words. "Heroes don't always look like the movies," Jimmy continued. "Sometimes they look exhausted. Sometimes they look hollow. Sometimes they look like they've been to hell and back." He stood up and addressed the camera directly. "Because that's exactly where they've been. They've been to hell, fighting for other people's lives, and they've come back changed." Jimmy turned back to Rachel. "Your daughter didn't draw a stranger. She drew her mother being brave. She drew what courage actually costs." Rachel broke down completely then, covering her face with her hands. Jimmy knelt down beside her chair, not caring about his expensive suit or the cameras rolling. "But here's what your daughter also knows," he said gently. "She knows that this woman, this hollow-eyed woman in the drawing, is the same person who saved hundreds of lives. She knows her mommy is someone who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away." Jimmy's voice grew stronger with conviction. "And you know what else? She's been drawing your story. The first picture isn't just before, it's who you were. The second isn't just now, it's who you became when the world needed you most." The audience rose to their feet in spontaneous applause, but many were openly sobbing. In the front row, a woman in scrubs was crying so hard her shoulders shook, clearly another healthcare worker, recognizing her own story in Rachel's words. "Rachel, can I tell you something?" Jimmy asked as the applause died down. "My dad was a veteran, and he used to have this look in his eyes sometimes. I didn't understand it as a kid, but now I know what it was," he continued. "It was the look of someone who'd seen too much, carried too much, given too much. And you know what? I was proud of that look." Rachel looked up at him, her eyes red but hopeful. "You think Emma might be proud too?" "I think Emma is more proud than you know," Jimmy replied, "because she got to witness what real heroism looks like. Not the pretty kind from movies, but the kind that costs everything." Jimmy walked back to his desk and picked up both drawings. "You know what I want to do? I want to frame these together, because this is the most honest portrait of heroism I've ever seen." He turned to his producers off camera. "Cancel my vacation next week. Dr. Martinez and Emma are going to Disney World, and it's on us." Rachel gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth. "Jimmy, no, I couldn't." "Yes, you could, and you will," Jimmy interrupted gently. "Because heroes deserve to remember what joy feels like. They deserve to make new memories with their daughters." The audience erupted again, but this time it was pure celebration. People were on their feet, cheering not just for the gift, but for the recognition of what Rachel had endured. "And when you get back," Jimmy added, "I want Emma to draw a new picture. One of you and her together at the Magic Kingdom." Rachel was sobbing now, But these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of being seen, of being understood. "How do I ever thank you?" she managed to say. "You don't," Jimmy replied simply. "You just promise me something. Promise me you'll take care of yourself, the way you took care of all those patients. Because the world needs heroes who are healthy," he continued. "And Emma needs a mom who remembers how to smile." Jimmy sat back down at his desk and looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, we throw around the word hero a lot. But tonight, you met the real thing. Dr. Rachel Martinez didn't just save lives during the pandemic," he said. "She showed us what it really costs to put others before yourself. And that cost is real, and it's heavy, and it matters." The show ended with no commercial break, no closing monologue, just Jimmy and Rachel sitting together in the quiet acknowledgement of what sacrifice actually means. 3 weeks later, Emma drew a third picture. It showed her and her mom on a roller coaster, both of them laughing with their hands in the air, cotton candy in the background, and Mickey Mouse ears on their heads. At the bottom, in that same shaky handwriting, it said, "Mommy again." But when Rachel looked closely, she noticed Emma had drawn laugh lines around her mother's eyes, something that hadn't been in the first drawing. Rachel framed all 3 drawings together in her office at the new wellness center she'd helped establish. Patients often asked about them, and she would tell them about the night a comedian helped her understand that looking broken doesn't mean being broken, that scars can be proof of survival rather than signs of failure. The segment went viral within hours, shared by healthcare workers around the world, who recognized their own reflections in Rachel's story. More importantly, it started conversations in hospitals across the country about supporting healthcare workers' mental health, leading to the first comprehensive physician wellness programs many facilities had ever implemented. And Jimmy? He kept a copy of Emma's drawings on his desk, right next to photos of his own daughters. On difficult days, when comedy felt trivial or the world seemed too dark for laughter, he would look at them and remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply see someone's pain and call it what it is. Heroism wrapped in human skin. Every year, on the anniversary of Rachel's appearance, Jimmy receives a new drawing from Emma. Last year's showed her and her mom working together in a garden, both smiling, both whole. The title read, "My Mom the Hero," and for the first time since the pandemic began, Rachel looked at her daughter's picture of her and didn't see a stranger looking back. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs. Sometimes they look exhausted. And sometimes they need someone to remind them that their sacrifice wasn't just noticed, it was honored.